from the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus. This is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon, I'm Asta Pandikanan, and these are your news headlines for noon. Britain's longest-serving monarch is lying in state at Westminster Hall after a solemn procession brought Queen Elizabeth's coffin from Buckingham Palace to the Houses of Parliament. Patrick Reevell is on the ground chatting with mourners.
Thousands of people are already lined up down here along the River Thames to now see the Queen lying in Westminster Hall.
I'm saddened, extremely saddened by the loss of Our Majesty, but I'm also very happy that we have our King.
People expected to wait many hours, some already waiting all night under the rain. People will be able to pass by the Queen's coffin 24 hours a day until Monday's funeral. Patrick Reevell, ABC News, London.
Parents across the Lower Mainland are scrambling to find a place for their kids now that schools are closed on September 19th. Reporter Riley Lyons has more on the story.
On September 19th, schools across Canada will be closed due to the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. Parents now need to find a place for their young children with less than a week notice. According to the Child Care Resource and Referral, an organization that has a master list of child care centers, daycares across the Lower Mainland are full for the holiday. One child care center in Maple Ridge, Start Smart, says that their two facilities are both at full capacity before the holiday was even announced. With daycare facilities full, some parents may be facing the option of taking work off for the day. Riley Lyons, 1680 The Crow.
And now we are joined by Riley Lyons. Hi Riley, who is going to be scrambling to try to find childcare options?
Thanks, Asta. Parents of young children who work in private sector jobs are going to be affected, as the holiday doesn't necessarily mean that these employees will have the day off.
Is the day off going to be completely Canada-wide?
No, schools will remain in session in Ontario, Quebec, and Saskatchewan, but BC has followed federal suit.
Thanks a ton, Riley.
Thank you, Asta.
Burnaby RCMP have released the details of a shooting that occurred last night and left one man dead. Ryan Bailey reports.
Just after 11 p.m. last night, police responded to reports of shots being fired on the 4700 block of Hastings Street. One man was found dead on the scene, and just 20 minutes later, police attended to a car fire found on the 8200 block of Burn Lake Drive. The investigation closed Hastings Street between Beta and Gamma Avenue, and police are still on scene with IHIT called in to investigate. Police are asking anyone in the area with dashcam footage to reach out. Ryan Bailey, 1680 The Crow.
After a couple of years of virtual editions, Canada is eager to participate in the 42nd annual Terry Fox Run. David Nava has the story.
The expectation to participate in person in the Terry Fox Run for the first time since 2019 is huge. Approximately 4 million runners are expected to participate, which will mean an all-time record for the event. Dr. Peter Black, researcher at the Vancouver Prostate Center, has raised more than $16,000, but he believes the run means more than raising funds.
So yeah, it's a lot of fun. The run is really cool because it brings people together, and I think that's what Terry Fox was also about, was just bringing everybody together behind this initiative to raise funds and awareness for prostate cancer.
The Terry Fox Foundation is inviting everyone to volunteer, participate, or visit terryfox.org/run to learn more. David Nava, 1680 The Crow.
BC is contributing $300,000 for the next phase of a study that's looking at potential high-speed rail services between Vancouver, Seattle, and Portland. This phase, led by the Washington State Department of Transportation, is to address funding requirements of the project, develop public outreach plan, and explore ways to integrate the rail line into regional transport and land use planning. Premier John Horgan says the proposal has the potential to cut travel time significantly between Vancouver and Seattle. Horgan also adds that this project offers new job creation and tourism. Previous studies show that rail service would develop stronger trade ties between BC, Washington, and Oregon, and create economic activity equal to $355 billion in the region. An officer has been pronounced dead in Toronto in an early morning crash. Adam Burns at the Associated Press has the story.
Police north of Toronto say an officer is dead after an early morning collision. The chief of York Regional Police says 38-year-old Constable Travis Gillespie was on his way to work when he was killed in the crash. The service says officers responded to a collision involving a Honda Accord and a Porsche Cayenne at around 6 a.m. today. Gillespie was pronounced dead at the scene, and the other driver, a 23-year-old man, was taken to hospital. From the Canadian Press, I'm Adam Burns.
The special unit dedicated to apprehending fugitives is alleged to have not done their job right in Saskatchewan. Adam Burns at the Canadian Press has more.
Here at home, the RCMP says a special unit dedicated to apprehending fugitives was not actively searching for the man they say is responsible for the stabbing rampage in Saskatchewan. The Correctional Service of Canada says Miles Sanderson was declared unlawfully at large in late May. A dedicated unit of the Saskatchewan RCMP was created last year to find people who are wanted for violating conditions of their parole, but the Mounties say the unit was not investigating Sanderson's case. From the Canadian Press, I'm Adam Burns.
The U.S. government is charging 3 Iranian citizens in a broad national hacking campaign. Sagar Meghani at the Associated Press has the story.
The Justice Department says the cyber attacks targeted power companies and local governments, small businesses, and nonprofits. It accuses the suspects of targeting victims in the U.S. and elsewhere, stealing data from networks, and demanding ransom payments to return it. The accused hackers have not been arrested. A department official says they're thought to be in Iran, and the charges make it functionally impossible for them to leave. Sagar Meghani, Washington.
The Israeli military says an army officer has been killed in a shootout in the occupied West Bank, while Palestinian officials say 2 gunmen were killed in the same clash. Jordana Miller has more.
2 Palestinian militants opening fire on an IDF checkpoint, killing an Israeli officer overnight in the disputed West Bank. The 2 gunmen later killed in a firefight with Israeli soldiers. The deadly attack claimed by the militant group, the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade. It comes after 5 months of near-nightly IDF arrest raids in the Jenin area, a breeding ground for militants. But critics say those arrest raids have turned far too deadly. 70 Palestinians killed since April, most suspected militants, but also a number of civilians. Jordana Miller, ABC News, Jerusalem.
The Fraser Valley Bandits announced that the team has been sold to local owners and rebranded as the Vancouver Bandits. The Bandits followed the Scarborough Shooting Stars as the second CEBL team operated by outside ownership. The rest of the teams in the league remain league-owned. The Vancouver Bandits posted a prideful post on Twitter saying, "A new energy fueled by the West." A 30-year-old Canadian freestyle skier from Montreal recently announced her retirement. Chloe Dufour-Lapointe announced her retirement today, closing on an outstanding career that included 4 Olympic competitions, one of which got her a silver medal. She made history as the first female Canadian freestyle skier to compete at 4 Olympics, with the Beijing Games in February being her last. The Whitecaps are playing tonight at BC Place against LA Galaxy. With just 4 games left on their schedule, the Whitecaps are on a 3-game losing streak, so it's all the more important for them to bag this one in. We'll find out tonight if the Whitecaps earn some hope for the playoffs. Jacob deGrom was outpitched by journeyman Adrian Sampson, and the frustrated New York Mets mustered little offense against in a 4-1 loss to the Chicago Cubs. Mets first baseman Pete Alonso says losses now are no worse than losses earlier in the season.
Every game is frustrating. You want to get every single game that you want. Just because this is in September doesn't mean it's as frustrating as it is now as if it would have been in April or wherever.
This afternoon is looking rather sunny after the gloomy and hazy morning we had here in Metro Vancouver. Currently, we're at 19 degrees Celsius and it feels like 22, but keep your jackets and hoodies close by because the drop in temperature tonight to 12 degrees Celsius is going to be a shocker. That was your news for noon. I'm Asta Pandikanan and you're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
Like, if I leave them on, I ruin the streak of the last, 10 years of never wearing shoes before. I do all kinds of tattoos, whatever the customer asks for mostly. But lately I've been doing mostly form line style indigenous tattoos. I'm Métis on my dad's side, but I was raised by my mom. So I didn't grow up with a huge personal connection to my indigenous ancestry. But as I started doing more indigenous tattoos, that kind of got me a little bit more interested in finding more about my own history.
Và sẽ hari tundo, tatemus li, sastros li, nadle witen yinka dene dakels. In my language, that means my name is Randall Bear Barnetson. I come from the Bear Clan, the village of Nadle, and of the Dakels First Nation. That's my nation. On the back tattoo, I think it's been about 12 hours now, I would say. 10 to 12 hours. On my left arm here, I have the bear for Dentemu, my Bear Clan. And then I have the Thunderbirds on the middle, and then the double eagles on the bottom. So this is for my Dakelth people on my mother's side, and then also the double eagles for my Newhawk family, and then the Thunderbirds for my father's side. His crest was a Thunderbird. So that's why I have the Thunderbird on my back as well, along with the bear. Since time immemorial, we would commission an artist to do a clan design or a crest for us in our community. We'd go to a local artist and ask them to do a design for our clan or community to represent ourselves, our family, our community, our nation.
Adi, Ani, Sasan, welcome to my studio.
So my tattoos, they all represent that, from my Bear Clan to my Thunderbirds to my Eagle Clan. They represent and they place me in my community and show my affiliation there. And so that's why I love working with Logan, because Logan, he helps me to kind of embody these teachings in these clans and crests, and he really contextualizes these teachings that we have. And then on this side, I got the East Van cross, because where I was born, East Van. So I kind of go between two, because traditionally, land and people are the most important things to us as traditional indigenous people. So when I turned 18, I was like, I'm gonna get the East Van cross on my arm. I'm gonna go to do it. I went to a tattoo artist and he said, nah, come back in a couple of years when you figure it out a bit more. And I was like, what the hell, man? I want to get tattooed. And he was like, nah, think about it some more, come back. And then I waited a decade and then Logan did it for me.
My name is Shanton Hopkins. I am a tattoo artist here at East Van Warren Tattoo Company. Born and raised in East Vancouver. I am Indigenous to Darcy Anderson Lake, better known to us as the Naquaqua people. It's part of the Statlium Nation. So growing up, I was a pretty rebellious kid. Just always getting into trouble, getting into fights, drinking, stealing cars when I was 12. Went to jail when I was 14. It's just a lot of pain and trauma from my mother. She was an alcoholic who dealt with her generational trauma from my grandmother, who was in residential school. So just trickled down, passed down to me, right? But me and myself, I've been doing a lot of work on myself. I've been sober now for 3 years. Trying to break the chain and the link for my kids, right? So my style, I like to stick with a realism, black and gray, but I like to try to incorporate a native form line art to it. So I do my own West Coast style, form line, native art with the realism. Yeah, it's just sort of a unique touch that I wanted to come up with. For me, I always wanted to sort of incorporate like the native art inside of my tattoo work. And black and gray realism is something that I always wanted to pursue. I want to keep that style of art alive. I want to keep the form line art alive, right? It's been here already for centuries. Even though it's been tweaked a little bit, whatever, like all artists have their own styles of their own art, right? Well, we have all kinds of different backgrounds getting like Oriental Japanese style sleeves. I tattooed this native guy just last week. We did a full native realism piece on his arm, full sleeve. He already had an existing like Oriental Japanese style dragon on his other arm, right? I'm like, yeah, if like you have like enough love and respect for the culture, like I don't see why it would be an issue for anybody to want to get like form line native art tattooed on their bodies, right? It's nothing but love and respect. That's all that matters, right?
I think it's really complicated. It's non-Indigenous people, unless there's like, the way I was taught is if there's a story, connection to the story, and you go about it in a good way, as you do work with an Indigenous artist, and you go about the proper protocols, and you know the story and the connection there, then it's more acceptable. However, if you get a clan design or a clan crest, then that has a such larger meaning behind it, and affiliation to, like I said, to place, community, to people. And you're essentially saying that you are part of them. And that's a tough thing to claim. And we always say it's not who you claim, but who claims you.
It's a little controversial, and it's everybody has a differing viewpoint. And for me, it's different client to client. Like sometimes, like I have some European tourist that's like, yeah, I want this salmon because I'm in Canada. And in that case, like, you know, go home and think about it a little bit, do a little bit of research. But other times, like I've tattooed white people that have been adopted by a nation and have lived their whole life on reserve and around Indigenous art and Indigenous people, and they want to honor that. And I think that's dope too. Bar down over there is like, was a strip club and very much like a biker skittish kind of hangout. My dad's stories about Steveston are a lot different than what my feelings about Steveston. I see Indigenous tattooing kind of flourishing even more. Just the artwork in itself is becoming more and more popular. People are more down to collect fine art and that sort of thing. Like I know the Canucks are having warm-up jerseys done by an Indigenous artist. So it's kind of in people's faces so much more, and it's so much more like widely accepted. And yeah, I think the future is bright for Indigenous tattooers, for sure.
Ooh, does it feel?
Yeah.
Greatest feeling.
Natalia for showcasing Logan and traditional tattooing and traditional Indigenous art, and having this be a part of the conversation and bringing us to the table in that. So, Natalia in my language means thank you for everything you've done for us.
Peter Percival knew his dream job would be firefighting since elementary school. Even though after graduation he put it on the back burner to do construction, he eventually came back to the dream, got certified in Texas, and now works for the Surrey Fire Department. Besides being a fighter, Peter has a side hobby of fishing and creating fishing reels. Doing things with fishing helps Peter cast away the stress of the job.
You know, it's just a relief for me, right? Fishing is, I find though that it gets harder and harder to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours to go fishing sometimes, right? I like to set up at the lake for a week and just relax, right? By the fire, fish a little bit and relax. So yeah, it's all an avenue to release stress.
Peter has always had a long history with fishing growing up, from the Mill Lake Fishing Derby to family trips. But it wasn't until later in life, when a family member asked to go fishing, that things really changed.
And then he said, "Do you want to go?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds like fun." And then boom, I was hooked, right? Like we would go twice a weekend, right? And I remember hiking into that limit hole and running out of leaders and not knowing how to tie our own, driving back to Fred's, driving back to the limit hole, hiking back in there. Come a long ways. Yeah, that's how salmon fishing started for me, right?
Aside from fishing, Peter now creates fishing reels with his father-in-law out of their garage. The story of how that started is kind of an interesting one.
My father-in-law is a machinist, and he's a very smart man. He's born in Germany, trained in Germany, and he has a machine in his garage. So we went on a camping trip, kind of a family camping trip, which is a long story because it kind of, fish and family tend to stink after 3 days. Anyways, we went on a camping trip, and I brought a Islander reel with me, right, which is made on Vancouver Island. And we took it apart on the picnic table just outside of Alaska, and kind of looked at how it was built and thought, he kind of looked at the design and figured, I could probably do this, and that's how it all started, right? Is that on a picnic table just outside, I guess it would have been more outside of the Yukon. He has a CNC machine, which is a computerized machine. It's 1985, so it's pretty old and antiquated, but he's a wizard on it. It's got a little screen on it, I don't know, maybe 10 inches by 10 inches, and it's green and black, right? So, and then he's got the mill or the lathe, right, to turn different parts and to buff things, and he does his own anodizing too, which colors the parts different colors. So he's not afraid to try something or do something, which a lot of times I find that fear holds me back. I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I want to do that, and then you just have to sometimes jump in, right, and say, like, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to just battle through it, and it'll work, right?
I asked Peter what he thought of the decline in fish population, and he's noticed a big drop-off in just a short span of time.
The percentage of fish, I mean, it's hard because I don't fish the way I used to, right? I feel like, yeah, we used to catch way more fish and fish all day long, but I put a lot more time in on the rivers, right? I don't think it'll run dry, but if you look at the sockeye, you can only fish every 4 years now, right? And then it's like a question mark, like, are they going to open it? Springs, they've had closed on the Fraser for numerous years. So I don't think that the river will be like, oh, the river's void of life. It'll be like, you're not allowed to fish it. That would be not a very good day. But look at what's happened on the Fraser, right? So we'll go from there.
John Reynolds, the chair of aquatic conservation, reminded me that not all of the 5 BC salmon species are necessarily in danger, but some are in trouble. The worst off in southern BC are Chinook and sockeye salmon.
Really gotten into quite a bit of trouble, to the point where the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada, which I happen to be the chair of, has actually recommended to the federal government that they could be at risk of extinction.
A big issue that John and Peter agree on is commercial fishing when it comes to the population of fish. John is appreciative of what the government has put in place to save the fish.
A lot of recreational fishing is fairly well guided by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans rules. And so if people fish responsibly and look after the fish, if they're putting them back, it certainly wouldn't be in my top list of problems.
I know what John said does sound really bad, but he does believe that the waters won't run dry of fish if people do things properly.
Well, I certainly support the decisions that have been made about reducing commercial fisheries for many species. That is often the easiest thing to do, I must admit, and because the salmon have such complicated life cycles, living in so many different places at different times, that it's hard to do much for them when they're in the ocean, especially when they're juveniles. They're not being caught in fisheries, and they're basically going to live or die according to the amount of food they have and the predators. So the control of commercial fisheries has, in general, been, I think, quite well done.
The last note from John is he wants us to remember to go support local organizations that help better the population of fish, because it's not just the government that makes the changes, so do we. I'm Kiara Collins with co-producer Mac Fleet with 1680 The Crow.
A motorcycle mechanic, Paige Everden, and her mentor tell the story of what it's like being a woman in an industry dominated 90% by men.
Maybe it's like a bit of a rebellious thing for me. Like when people tell me I can't do things, like I want to prove them wrong. Maybe also like I just got used to being told that I couldn't do things because I was a woman growing up, and then I just sort of realized that that wasn't true or right, and like kind of decided that I wanted to be a person that fought those things. My name is Paige Everden, and I am a motorcycle mechanic. I work at a shop called True Grit. Sitting in front of me now with dirt and oil stains on her face and clothes is Paige Everden, who has been at BCIT for the last almost 2 years and is working on getting an education to support her dreams and aspirations of working in motorcycle mechanics and metal fabrication. I took the motorcycle mechanics course and graduated that. And then I applied and got into the Metal Fabricator Foundations course. I did it because I want to do custom work on bikes. And when you're a metal fabricator, you can make bike frames, you can make gas tanks, you can make front ends, you can make you can make anything with metal. Driving down an industrial road with lots of potholes and dust all around, we come across a large red barn, which is Rochelle Trellenberg's motorcycle mechanic shop.
Paige is great. Paige learned so fast. It just blows my mind when somebody comes in and you really see that they're really good at something just right off the hop, and she absolutely is so good at that, and she's great with people, and she shows up.
Should I just pour it? It should fit. Let me look. I mean, if it's not fitting for you. It sucks to siphon gas, so let's try not to do that. Both Paige and her boss Rochelle share the same dreams and aspirations towards this workforce.
But you know what? I really have this drive suddenly to go to school to be a motorcycle mechanic. Like something in me just pushed me. So I went to BCIT for during the day, and then I worked in the nights. The dream kind of just was something cool where we'd work on bikes on the side, we'd do these little hangouts, we'd show people what we learned in class, and I really thrived in that environment. It was crazy, right? So, and I posted that I would work basically for baked goods. Anybody that needed their bike fixed, anybody that needed anything having to do with their bike, if I could do it, I would basically do it for free.
At the same time, they share the same struggles and the same obstacles by being a woman in this male-led workforce.
A guy will come in and I'll go out to greet and prep, and they'll walk right past me. And I'll be like, okay. But then the men in the shop that totally support me will be like, no, she's the one you need to speak with. Like, don't even come near me. I don't really allow for the pervert or the chauvinist to come through these doors.
Like Rochelle, Paige has faced a lot of the same misogyny, especially in her classroom.
So many examples. I guess like one thing that happened quite a number of times that like stands out to me is just like the amount of times that I would walk into the room or walk up to the group and they would stop talking because obviously they were talking about something, or maybe me, and they didn't want me to hear what they were saying. And then there were times when they didn't stop talking and I overheard some of the things that they said, and it was like some pretty gnarly stuff about women, you know? And it was just like, it felt really gross. It didn't feel good to experience that kind of thing and hear it. And it just makes you feel like an outsider, you know? Like that was like the general feeling I got from being in that classroom, was just like that I wasn't fully welcome there, I guess. Not by the teacher. The teacher was amazing. Just the guys that like were obviously attracted to the class. Yeah.
And the teacher was a female, right?
That's right, yeah. They never said that kind of stuff around her. They were very careful not to.
Why don't I just dump it out then?
Yeah, you can totally remove the tank. There's a bunch of wires at the bottom that need to be removed, right? So,
regardless of the misogyny and mistreatment that both Paige and Rochelle have faced coming up in this industry, they still remain optimistic and acknowledge the fact that most of this mistreatment comes from wrongfully engraved lessons in a lot of people's minds that they simply can't change, and they don't let that stop them.
If I'm being honest, like I think that she's doing enough just by having gone into the industry like so long ago and just like existing there and like now being a teacher. I think that that's really, really good. I think that basically like you can't change things overnight, and like it's a bit too much to ask for like one teacher to try and like change the like things that everyone has learned over their entire lives.
Not all the old boys are like that, but the majority that have been in the industry for as long as they, have been walking, are brutal. Yeah. And they just can't come out of this habit of women are there to touch and talk dirty to, and not to have a collective conversation about what an engine needs. Yeah.
After learning about the major issues of misogyny and mistreatment in this workforce, it leaves you wondering what motivates the small percentage of women struggling to overcome these obstacles and what keeps them going.
Because fuck them. No, for real, like fuck those guys, you know? Like, because, I mean, actually, okay, like obviously it's not just spite, but like, I don't know, you can't let it slow you down.
Paige's rebellious attitude and unwillingness to back down, no matter what obstacles and struggles she faces, is truly inspiring, and she leaves us with this last piece of advice.
I would say that if a person looks at you and makes a snap decision based off of your gender or your appearance, and they decide that they don't want to listen to you, and they decide that they're not going to give you a chance because you're not like what they want to see in the industry, then don't waste your time on them. Just don't bother trying to gain their respect. The only person's respect you need is your own. And as long as you know that you can do it and you understand that like you're a capable person, then you don't have to worry about them, you know?
Riley Lyons and Maha Mashmi for 1680 The Crow.
The mainland misfits are lacing up their skates for another bone-crunching season of roller derby, a fast-paced, full-contact sport primarily played by women. Our reporter Gurpreet Kambo, who was given the derby name Purple Rain, that's rain spelled R-E-I-G-N, joins us from Surrey.
Powerful. I like the focus it brings. So I always found like games and competitions, it's like you enter into this like, you only have one thing to think about, and like that's the game.
It teaches you how to like fall down and get back up again repetitively, and then you can also apply
flamboyant, I think. You know, there was a lot of color, a lot of screaming, a lot of yelling, a lot more face paint, stuff like that. It was just a fun time, and it was something I'd never seen before. And I just kind of got the bug
We became friends through Derby and at Derby, and then slowly started hanging out outside of Derby, and now, I have a lifelong friend from it.
Blue wheels, pink toe stops, and then my toe covers are purple and my laces are purple.
For me, I really enjoy just being on skates, period. So I'll skate anytime, anywhere. And then also, it's probably one of the only times in my week where I'm not thinking about work or stressing. It's a very good way to sort of disconnect and just have fun.
Two lines of 4 roller skaters, pushing and pulling against each other, like a rugby scrum if you added wheels. This chaotic jumble of arms and roller skates is what each team's jammer has to break through to score points. This is the sport of roller derby.
Pronouns are she, they. Hi, I'm Barbie, she, her.
Wrecking ball,
Hooligan, she, her. Maddie Longlegs, she, her. Sharky, she, her.
On Skip, he, him.
Party
and Nelson, he, him.
Let's do. Trill, she, her. Kendra, she, her.
You're up. What? Oh, so, right, I forgot. Something that always is a problem.
They're lacing up at practice. We caught Frank the Tank as she was getting ready.
Okay, so I saw the movie Whip It like basically everybody else has. And then I was working at a hockey shop, and I didn't know there was a league nearby me. I thought the closest one was Vancouver, and at the time I couldn't really drive out to Vancouver to play. And when I was working at this hockey shop, this guy comes in and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go play roller derby." I'm like, "Sorry, you're gonna what?" And basically that night was what we used to call a punch and pie, which was like an intro to roller derby and the sport itself, and like kind of a recruitment night, and I was hooked.
The sport of roller derby is slowly making its comeback after the pandemic. The Greater Vancouver Roller Derby Association is practicing right now to get back into game shape.
Generally call what we're doing right now an edging drill. So you essentially have one person that's acting as the jammer and one person that's acting as the blocker. And one person, the jammer, is trying to push the blocker to a certain point, especially for the blocker to get good at really being down in their knees and kind of, with blocking you can't stay still, you have to still be moving a little bit. So that's the main.
Try again,
Derby name Bruceberry Pie.
I'm 5'6". I'm plus size. I have orange hair. I've got tattoos covering my whole left arm and pretty much both my legs. And also you can't see, but underneath as well. So when I first started derby, I would fall all the time because I was a really terrible skater. So I would fall and I bruised really easy. So I would be constantly covered in bruises. And so the name just came very naturally. Yeah. I really missed it during the pandemic. One, the physical contact, but also the emotional contact that you get to be around people. It was lovely. I didn't realize how much I missed it, I think, until it got taken away, or how much I needed it. Yeah.
We're gonna do the wrap around, which was the thing that Frank demonstrated. So we're gonna come around, do a full turn into holding them essentially. Cool.
I've been around the block, you could say, yeah. And I've gotten to do the whole, like I said, the whole spectrum, right? So when I first started, it was super casual, fishnets, just for fun, chugging beers at halftime, that kind of a thing. And then I've gotten to do all sorts of stuff. I was on Team Canada, I got to do that. I played with the men's league for a while as well. So all these dudes are all my teammates, and we get to play super competitive. And then I also get to go to you go on trips. We go to Vegas every year and just play for fun. It's super great. I mean, the whole rainbow.
From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio,
You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mac Fleet here with your 1 o'clock news update on 1680 The Crow. Parents across the Lower Mainland are scrambling to find a place for their kids now that schools are closed on September 19th. Reporter Riley Lyons has more.
On September 19th, schools across BC will be closed because of the holiday regarding Queen Elizabeth's funeral. Parents who work in private sector jobs now need to find childcare for their young children with less than a week's notice. This is also placing a strain on the limited number of childcare facilities in BC. Start Smart in Maple Ridge has both of their facilities full for Monday.
It was exactly as soon as the news was breaking, then we were getting all these calls. As soon as they said that the schools were going to be closed, we had an influx, tons and tons of calls.
With daycare facilities full, some parents may be facing the unideal option of taking work off for the day. Riley Lyons, 1680 The Crow.
Queen Elizabeth II made her final journey from Buckingham Palace to the House of Parliament, where she will lie in state for 4 days. Thousands of people gathered to mourn as the royal family followed the Queen's coffin during the procession. ABC's Patrick Revel talked to one mourner who went above and beyond to pay respects to his monarch.
One person I met here, he was dressed in typically sort of almost classic old-fashioned British style. He was in a black funeral suit with a bowler hat and a long black umbrella. And he'd been here since 10 o'clock last night, and he'd been standing. He had not sat down once because he didn't want to get a crease in his trousers before he said farewell to the Queen. And that was because he was a former soldier, and he said that she was his commander-in-chief.
The state funeral will be held for the Queen on Monday. The evacuation order for residents of Hope has now been lifted. The Flood Falls Trail wildfire is, however, still active. The Fraser Valley Regional District did warn residents that if the fire increases in size again, another evacuation order could be issued. As of now, no structures have been reported damaged, but the fire did force the district to close sections of Highway 1. A shooting in Burnaby around 11 p.m. last night has left one man dead. Police have shut down a portion of Hastings Street to conduct this investigation. After responding to this shooting, police were notified that a vehicle was on fire on the 82nd block of Burn Lake Drive. Investigators are asking that if anyone has dashcam footage of these incidents, to please come forward with it. A report from Statistics Canada states that Canadian farmers are on pace to produce better crops this year than they did last year. The crops of 2021 suffered from a severe drought last summer. This summer has provided much better growing conditions due to much more precipitation. The biggest benefiter from these conditions is wheat, which is projected to increase its input by 55% this year. The agency also said that canola, barley, soybean, and corn crops are excelling as well. The RCMP addressed the public in a news conference at the RCMP headquarters in Surrey this morning. They released the profile of the person suspected to have cut the Sea to Sky gondola twice in the past 3 years. They say the suspect is extremely fit and have extensive knowledge of the area and of the tools required to cut the cable. Today, coincidentally, marks the second anniversary of the 2020 cutting of the cable car. A vigil is set to take place in Humboldt tonight as members of the community and 2018 Humboldt Bronco families look to pay their respects after the James Smith Cree Nation tragedy. The vigil is to be held at the Humboldt Garden Sanctuary. The International Atomic Energy Agency says engineers are making progress on repairs around the Russian-controlled nuclear power plant. ABC's Darnell Blocker warns that there are nuclear sites that need protection in Ukraine.
It's more than just this one site. There are 16 nuclear facilities that are questionable and that are vulnerable. So, yes, they're safe now. IAEA is on the ground. They have established a buffer zone, but you know, it's just so tenuous and it's extremely dangerous.
Earlier today, Ukraine President Zelensky watched his country's flag get hoisted above the recently captured city of Izium. A newly constructed University of Michigan facility that will be home to the most powerful laser in the United States is hosting its first experiment this week. They named the laser Zeus. It is expected to make the U.S. competitive again in the realm of high-power laser facilities. The U.S. built the world's first petawatt laser a quarter century ago, but hasn't kept pace with the more ambitious systems in Europe and Asia. Zeus was awarded $18.5 million by the National Science Foundation to establish it as a federally funded international user facility. Thank you for tuning in to your 1 o'clock news update with Mac Fleet on 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.